Hello there, men, and welcome to the Masculinism Movement channel, a place for men to be men and talk about masculinity and men's issues. I'm your host, Brian Krall, and today I'm going to be talking to you about what is called the apex fallacy. This is the logical fallacy that feminism, and oftentimes women in general, have used to make us all think that we are living in a patriarchy when we are actually living in a matriarchy. How exactly have they done this? Well, the apex fallacy occurs when a sample of a group's highest performing members is taken, and then the entire group is evaluated based upon that sample, as if all of the group members perform as well as these top members. Some of you know that I'm an athlete and a personal trainer, and I have a YouTube where I teach fitness programming that can be found on the homepage of this channel. So as an athlete, I've come up with a really good example for you of how this works. Let's say that last Olympics, the American team won in some sports that are very important to me as an athlete. So I used that example set by that group of athletes in that game and started claiming that since the American team won in those games, they have definitely proven that Americans are the most athletic people on the planet. And since I'm an American, that of course lumps me in with these broad sweeping generalizations, so I use it to boost my credibility of what I'm saying. See how that works? So what I've done is taken a small group of the best athletes in the world, and because they've proven themselves to be the best athletes in the world, I say that all people of that same whole entire ethnic group are as well by association. The truth, however, as many people know, is that America is one of the countries that suffers from the most obesity and obesity-related disorders. And we also don't have anywhere near close to the best healthcare in the world, and we've had a medical crisis on our hands for a long time. So our population is generally not only not at all athletic, but they are on the fat and sick side. So if countries were to be accurately compared person to person, then my little analogy based upon our Olympic team would be shown to be what it is, a fallacy. But people generally know better than to do this. Like, no one looks at the American Olympic sports team when it wins a victory and says, man, Americans are so athletic, thinking that all Americans are like this team and that if only they had been born American, they too would be an Olympic athlete. No, you just don't see that level of ignorance. Right? People know that these Olympic athletes are the top athletes in the country, and the rest of the country is not like them. That is why they are at the Olympics, right? People just generally aren't so ignorant as to equate whole countries' populations with such a small sample of its best athletes. But yet we do see this type of fallacy used sometimes in some circumstances. And so the people who are using this type of fallacy don't have to be told that it is fallacious, because they know exactly what they are doing and are doing it on purpose. They are being intentionally deceptive. The type of scenario that I just illustrated in which a personal trainer is using it to boost credibility, well, this is exactly the type of thing that people do in marketing and sales on purpose, even though it is extremely misleading and unethical. And that is why when presented with evidence to the contrary, they usually don't change their messaging. They know they are lying. They are doing it on purpose just to make sales. Now, to be fair, this doesn't always require marketing and manipulation. However, it can and does sometimes happen naturally and innocently. So for instance, the example of the Olympic team was a good one that I chose for good reason, because the Olympics does happen. And we do look at these athletes on the TV. The best athletes from each country go to the Olympics and they compete on TV, right? So it is only the best athletes who appear televised around the world. Just like how celebrities and public figures and politicians are the people who are on the top tier of society and are also generally the ones who show up on TV and are able to be seen by people around the world. So other people from other countries don't see Americans how they really are because they aren't living here among us. So they only see the Americans who have the highest status on society and thus are the ones who appear in the media. So they're mostly going to see celebrities, famous athletes, models, politicians, and public figures, and so on. So often the example of a culture that is shown on the world stage is the best of the best that culture has to offer, the leaders of its various fields. These are the population samples that different cultures see from us. Generally, it is not the populace that they are seeing, only the elite. So you see, some people are simply more visible to more people because they are in the media more. And those people tend to be the ones who are the highest status in society. And as for the rest of us, well, most of the populace of a country is basically invisible to everyone else. While some people are highly visible in society in general, most people aren't, but are invisible to society in general. So when it comes to people, we do not see things as they truly are. We see them as they are presented by the media. And the way they are presented often doesn't represent how they truly are, even when it is not done manipulatively. But because this does already happen naturally, it also makes for a great manipulation tactic, right? The fact that it happens naturally only makes it easier to use as a manipulation tactic and get away with. Now, as I said, most people are invisible to most others, and most men are especially invisible to most women. And that is because women really only see the men they are interested in looking at. And that is the men they find attractive. And that is the men with wealth, status, and power. These are the only men that women want to see, so they are blind to all other men. So they take this very limited scope, and then they make statements like, men rule the world, and men control everything, and we live in a patriarchy and such, because they're only paying attention to the top 1% or less of men out there who are the apex of society. And then they make broad, sweeping generalizations under the assumption that all men are like that, when in fact the rest of the 90-some-odd% of the men out there are actually beneath women in society, which is exactly why we are invisible to them. And so most of the statements that feminists and women make about men come from generalizations and assumptions based upon this logical fallacy called the apex fallacy. So for example, when it comes to the wage gap and employment gap, women point out how there are more men in STEM fields and such, but not how there are more men in hard labor positions by far, and there are more female university graduates and more women in fields such as academics and social sciences. So through this bias, they can make it seem like men have the better, higher paying jobs, when the truth is that while men may overall get paid more because the richest 1% of the apex in the world who own almost all of the wealth are mostly men, but that doesn't mean that all men have better jobs than women. In fact, through affirmative action, women are actually getting the better jobs, and men are getting relegated to harder positions like hard labor and skilled trades such as construction jobs instead of universities. But feminists are able to cherry pick from the apex of men on the social hierarchy and just use them as an example for all men with this apex fallacy. What they are basically doing is taking a true statement, like most CEOs are men, which is true, but then with this fallacy, they turn it into most men are CEOs, which is false. And what you'll find is that lies and manipulation that originally come from a truth or contain a grain of truth are easy to use in this way, where the manipulator can distort the perception of truth or use the truth to make other assumptions and points that aren't themselves true, right? Even though the original point was. Now, granted, some of the people who speak about men with the apex fallacy may actually believe what they are saying because they literally have been brainwashed and don't have enough brain power to see the paradox that is right in front of their face. You'd be surprised what brainwashing can do, especially when it's coming from a powerful, evil entity such as feminism, and especially when it is being done to NPCs who don't think for themselves. So I'm sure some of the women who say that men rule the world and such are just ignorant due to their blindness and brainwashing. However, when you hear a feminist really preaching about it, I'm sure much of what she's saying is actually just manipulation tactics. Because feminists do get shown statistics and evidence by people like me in debates, as I just did in the series that I just finished completing with the last video, which was a series of several videos proving that we live in a gynocentric matriarchy that discriminates against and oppresses men. So make sure you've seen those videos. And what happens when we present evidence that disproves feminists' claims? They just continue to use the same logical fallacies, just like, marketers and salespeople, because all that matters to them is getting what they want, and they're willing to be unethical to do so. So it is just a manipulation tactic, and you should not believe all of their lies. They do it not just because they are blind to most men in society, but think about why exactly they are in fact blind to most men in society. It is because they don't give a fucking shit about us. They really do not care about any of the men who are beneath them in society. If they gave a shit, they wouldn't be so blind to us and ignorant to our plights, most of which are mostly caused by them. But they only care about the top men in society, the apex predators. That is why they are only looking at them and talking about them and ignoring the rest of us. We do not matter to them because we are beneath them. So this apex fallacy is actually indicative of some deep level misandry and prejudice against most men, as well as they're seeing these apex men as status symbols, who they use the symbol of in order to place unreasonably high expectations on what a man is supposed to be, or as they say, who is a real man. And as for the rest of us men who are not on top, well, we aren't even real men to them. They don't even see us as human and deserving of the same human rights as them. They don't even see us at all because they don't want to have to look at things that they think are beneath them. We are like animals to them. So next time you hear a feminist talking about the patriarchy and how men rule the world and everything, call her out for using this apex fallacy and expose the truth behind what she is saying. That she just doesn't give a shit about most men and only cares about the men that are at the top. And even if she's making these men at the top out to be her enemy, that doesn't mean she also doesn't want to be able to date them and use them for their position in society and the social utility that it would provide. So think about that too. But otherwise, that concludes this talk. Thank you for listening. Be sure to share your own thoughts and opinions by commenting below. And if you like this video, be sure to hit the like button and share these messages with everyone by sharing the video on social media and talking about these things too. And lastly, check out the links in the description below for other resources for your masculine personal development and living the life you want to as an independent man. And if you can, please donate because your support funds me doing this work. And stay tuned for the next video coming out soon, which will be on the different forms of female hypocrisy and double standards that they place on us men. And make sure you subscribe so you'll be notified when that is. And otherwise, take care of yourselves, men, because no woman out there is going to.